Hi guys, it's Ms. Upstrom. So I thought that I would walk you through the notes for the Canterbury Tales, since we're starting that unit now. So a little background about the Canterbury Tales. The time period is medieval time. During that time, which is like there's a different phases of the time period, but basically 1000 to 1450. So that's the time period that we're looking at. And during medieval society, there were three classes at that time. And they were the nobility, who controlled everything, the church, who controlled whether or not you went to heaven or hell, and then the commoners were the last class, and all they did was provide for the physical needs and basically do everything, but had no real rights or sway over society. One of the things that started to grow during this time period was the middle class. And there were lots of merchants and entrepreneurs who are starting to make a business, especially in like larger cities, um, and were accruing wealth, and therefore were able to move themselves up the influential ladder. And this is what happened for Chaucer's family. So Geoffrey Chaucer is the author of the Canterbury Tales. Um, his father was a wine merchant, and so he accrued a lot of money and sway and knew a lot of people, and was not big on pushing his children to go into the same business. So Chaucer was able to be educated, which was rare for somebody who was not part of the noble class. Um, and he became a page for an aristocratic family. And he was so good at his job that they, talked him up, and he got promoted to other families. And eventually he worked for King Edward's household, counting money, keeping track of everything that went in and out of the kingdom. This didn't take up all of his time. He had a side interest in writing because he was educated and therefore he had read a lot. So he decided to try writing his own poetry. Poetry was all that was written. There weren't such things as novels or anything like that. There were plays, there was poetry, songs, that sort of thing. So he started writing poetry, and he wrote a couple of texts that were published during his life, but it wasn't like really well known or anything like that. He wasn't famous for that. He was known for his ability as a customs official. Eventually, he starts writing the Canterbury Tales. Now, the thing that's really interesting about the Canterbury Tales, so during the medieval time period, English was looked at as like the most base language. It was for the common people. None of the upper classes wrote or corresponded or socialized speaking English, though they knew how to speak English. It was much more learning and speaking French. So it was interesting that Geoffrey Chaucer decides to write the Canterbury Tales in English. Now, it's Old English of the time period, so when I show you a clip later about the way that it sounds, you wouldn't really be able to understand it. But the problem was that he ended up dying before he could finish them, but he had a plan. And we know this because of what he put into his notes that still existed. He never finished it, though. So he intended to write 120 stories. He only completed 22 and then started two others, as well as writing the prologue. A prologue is the little bit before a story that kind of sets up the story. So he started to write them all, but he never finished. But we know that he intended to write 120. We know this because of the prologue. So a little bit about the Canterbury Tales in general. It's a story about some pilgrims who were going to go to Canterbury. Now, Canterbury is a place that is of major religious significance. There was a martyr for Christianity, and supposedly, if you go and you pray to that martyr, he'll help you in different ways. And so people would go and make a pilgrimage, travel from one place to another, to pay homage to the martyr of Canterbury. And the group of travelers decide that to pass the time, because they have a ways to go, that they'll tell stories, and it'll be a competition. And so the person who tells the best story is going to get free food and be able to say that they told the best story. They're going to tell one story on the way there and one story on the way back. And so these group of travelers tell different stories. What makes this collection of stories so special that it lasted beyond Chaucer even not completing it and his death is that it had people who were wealthy, in the church, and commoners all, there's my fingers, all going on the journey together and listening to each other. That would flip and never happen at this time period. Nobody cared to listen to poor people. Nobody cared to hear their stories or what their life was like or anything like that. So it was really, really weird and significant that this story did, and which is why it became popular, because it showed us a snapshot into those people's lives. Another thing that makes it really unique is that all the characters are so realistic that people wonder if some of them were based on people Chaucer knew. And there's some research and stuff like that that you can go into it about that, but it's not really for sure. Also, it shows us the time period. It shows us the culture. It shows us the dress. It shows us food. It shows us behaviors. It shows us what was valued or not valued, or what Chaucer valued or didn't, according to the time period, which might be a little interesting because he expresses some things that most people would not actually say, but he was dead, so who cares? So that's something that makes the Canterbury Tales stand out. One of the characters specifically that is really special that we're going to read about is the wife of Bath. Bath is a place in England. She's just called the wife of Bath. She is given a name, but it's not, for sure that that's her name, but she goes by the title wife of Bath because she's married many times. Her personality in particular is very interesting because women at this time, obviously, very long time ago, were not really valued, were not listened to, tended not to be educated or have any power or control. But the wife of Bath has all of those things. She's very smart. She's a sassy businesswoman. She tells it like it is. She's rich. She travels far. And the most exciting, people listen to her. What? I know. Listening to women. What will happen next? They'll be able to vote or something. So the story of the wife of Bath is very interesting to historians because she is really unique and seems so realistic, the things that she says and points out, that people really think that it was someone Chaucer knew. So those are the Canterbury Tales, and we'll be going and reading a couple of them and the prologues to the whole story. I miss you guys.